I'm Rebecca Mitchell, 34, and I built my boutique clothing business from nothing. Last summer, during our family reunion, I checked my bank account and felt my heart stop. Every penny was gone. I thought it was a glitch until my brother-in-law Kyle smirked across the room. "We needed it more than you," he snorted, as if stealing my life savings was justified. Trembling, I reached for my bag and said, "Then you won't mind what's coming next." As they laughed, a loud bang shook the house. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up against family betrayal. Growing up in Portland, I was always the responsible one. Mom and Dad ran a small hardware store, working long hours to give my sister Allison and me a comfortable middle-class life. I started working at 14, saving every dollar from my summer jobs, while Allison preferred socializing and spending whatever money came her way. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough, and more importantly, my parents taught us the value of hard work and integrity. After graduating with a business degree, I spent 3 years working at a corporate retail chain, learning the industry from the ground up. Nights and weekends, I developed my business plan for a boutique that would showcase sustainable, locally made women's clothing. My friends thought I was crazy when I quit my stable job to launch Mitchell Designs with my last $5,000 in savings. The first 2 years were brutal, 18-hour days, living on ramen and reinvesting every cent of profit back into the business. 5 years ago, tragedy struck when my parents died in a head-on collision with a drunk driver. The grief was overwhelming. Allison and I handled it differently. I threw myself into work, while she spiraled into a depression, dropping out of college and bouncing between dead-end jobs. When our parents' estate was settled, we each inherited $75,000. I invested mine in expanding my store and building an online presence, finally seeing the business gain real traction. Allison met Kyle Henderson 3 years ago at a casino, of all places. Within 6 months, they were married in a lavish ceremony that seemed well beyond their means. Kyle worked in financial consulting, though he was vague about details. Tall, with slicked-back hair and an expensive watch that seemed slightly too flashy, he had a way of dominating conversations, especially about money. From our first meeting, something about him set off alarm bells for me. "Your sister's business is cute," he'd said at their wedding reception, swirling expensive scotch in his glass. "But real money is made in investments and assets, not selling clothes to hipsters." The comment stung, but I brushed it off. For Allison's sake, I tried to build a relationship with Kyle. But over time, I noticed troubling patterns. When Kyle was around, Allison became quieter, constantly checking his reactions before speaking. The vibrant, opinionated sister I knew seemed to fade away. Phone calls between us grew shorter and less frequent. My suspicions about Kyle's financial stability were confirmed when my cousin Emma mentioned seeing him arguing with debt collectors outside a local bank. When I gently asked Allison about their finances, she became defensive, insisting everything was better than ever despite her increasingly anxious demeanor. The lake house had been in our family for generations, a modest 3-bedroom cabin on the shores of Lake Oswego. After our parents died, Allison and I decided to keep it as a shared property and continue the annual family reunion tradition every July. It was the one time each year when our extended family, uncles, aunts, and cousins, gathered for a weekend of reminiscing, swimming, and barbecues. This particular July, I arrived at the reunion with mixed emotions. My business was finally taking off. I'd just secured a prime location for a second store and had been approved for a business expansion loan. The $120,000 in my account was earmarked for the down payment and initial inventory. It represented 5 years of 60-hour work weeks, countless sacrifices, and the future I'd been building. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled up to the lake house on Friday afternoon. The familiar cedar siding and blue shutters brought a wave of nostalgia. Uncle Robert was already setting up the grill, and Aunt Patricia was arranging flowers on the porch. Cousin Emma waved enthusiastically from the dock where she was inflating water toys for her kids. "Rebecca," Emma called, jogging up from the shoreline to hug me. "It's been too long. How's the boutique?" "Better than ever," I said, popping the trunk to grab my overnight bag. "We're expanding to a second location downtown." "How are the kids?" "Growing like weeds and eating me out of house and home," she laughed, helping with my cooler. Her voice lowered. "Allison and Kyle got here about an hour ago. Just prepare yourself." "That bad?" Emma made a face. "Kyle's been bragging about some investment windfall. New car, designer clothes. It's a bit much." I nodded, steeling myself as we approached the house. Through the screen door, I could hear Kyle's booming voice dominating the conversation, something about a real estate opportunity that was guaranteed to double someone's money. Allison spotted me first, her face lighting up briefly before glancing at Kyle. She looked thinner than when I'd last seen her, despite the expensive-looking sundress and carefully applied makeup. "Becca," she called, using my childhood nickname as she gave me a quick hug. "You finally made it." Kyle turned, raising his whiskey glass in my direction. "The entrepreneur arrives. Tell us, how's the little shop doing? Still selling enough dresses to keep the lights on?" The condescension in his tone was unmistakable, but I smiled politely for Allison's sake. "We're expanding, actually. Just secured a second location." "In this economy?" "Brave," he chuckled, pulling Allison closer in a way that seemed more possessive than affectionate. I noticed a Rolex on his wrist that definitely hadn't been there at Christmas, and Allison's new diamond earrings caught the afternoon light. Uncle Robert saved me by announcing it was time to get the steaks going, and I used the opportunity to escape to my usual bedroom at the end of the hall. As I unpacked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Kyle's newfound prosperity. According to Emma, he'd been laid off from his job at an investment firm 6 months ago after clients complained about mismanagement. I placed my laptop on the small desk by the window and tucked my tablet into the nightstand drawer, making a mental note to check on some urgent business emails after dinner. What I didn't know then was that this simple family reunion was about to become the battlefield for everything I'd worked for. The first evening of our reunion followed its familiar rhythm, though the underlying tensions made the air feel heavy despite the cheerful conversation. Aunt Patricia had outdone herself with a spread of her famous potato salad, 7-layer dip, and homemade rolls that reminded me of childhood summers. "Rebecca, honey, tell us more about the second store," Uncle Robert asked as we gathered around the large oak dining table. A retired high school principal, he'd always been the family mediator, skillfully navigating conversations away from potential conflicts. "It's in the Pearl District," I explained, feeling a genuine spark of excitement despite my unease. "The location is perfect, right between a popular coffee shop and an art gallery. The foot traffic alone should double our customer base." "That sounds expensive," Kyle interjected, cutting into his steak. "Commercial real estate in that area must be what, $1.50 per square foot? Seems risky." "I've done my research," I replied evenly. "The numbers work." Speaking of numbers, Aunt Patricia chimed in, "Ever the family gossip collector, I hear Melissa Anderson's daughter just declared bankruptcy from her clothing store venture. Such a shame. These small businesses, they're so vulnerable." I noticed Kyle's slight smirk and the way he glanced at Allison, who stared intently at her barely touched dinner. Cousin Emma, bless her, changed the subject. "Dad, tell everyone about your new fishing boat." As Uncle Robert launched into a detailed description of his retirement splurge, I felt Emma squeeze my hand under the table in solidarity. After dinner, as everyone moved to the living room for board games and drinks, I excused myself to check on some work emails. In my room, I immediately noticed something off. My laptop wasn't quite in the position I'd left it, angled slightly differently on the desk. The charging cable was plugged into a different USB port. Small details, but as someone meticulous about my belongings, especially my work devices, the discrepancies set off internal alarms. I opened my laptop and checked my browser history. Nothing unusual appeared, but that didn't mean much if someone knew how to cover their tracks. As I was about to close the laptop, a notification from my bank appeared, "New device accessing your account." I frowned, clicking through to the security center to find 3 login attempts from an unrecognized device, all within the last hour. The attempts had failed due to incorrect password entries, but the timing was too coincidental to ignore. Closing my laptop, I decided to keep a closer eye on my belongings for the remainder of the weekend. Perhaps I was being paranoid, but something didn't feel right. When I returned to the living room, Kyle was showing off his new watch, making a show of how the light caught the diamond bezel. Limited edition, he boasted to Uncle Robert. Only 500 made worldwide. Must have cost a pretty penny, Uncle Robert remarked, not sounding particularly impressed. "You've got to spend money to make money," Kyle replied with a wink. "I've got some investment opportunities that would make your retirement fund look like pocket change." Allison stood slightly behind him, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. When she saw me, something flickered across her face. Guilt? Worry? Before I could interpret it, Kyle pulled her into the conversation. "Tell them about your new car, babe," he prompted, and Allison dutifully described the luxury SUV they'd purchased last month. Later, as the evening wound down and people started heading to bed, Emma pulled me aside on the porch, the gentle lapping of lake water providing background noise. "Something's up with them," she whispered, glancing back at the house. "Allison called me last week asking if she could borrow $5,000. Said it was for a medical bill, but wouldn't give details. When I asked if everything was okay with Kyle's job, she got defensive and hung up." I sighed, watching the moonlight ripple across the lake. "I think someone tried accessing my bank accounts today." My laptop was moved, and I got security alerts about login attempts. Emma's eyes widened. "You don't think?" "I don't know what to think," I admitted. "But I'm changing all my passwords tonight and enabling 2-factor authentication on everything. Back in my room, I did exactly that, also taking the precaution of slipping my laptop and tablet into my locked suitcase." Before falling asleep, I received another notification, another failed attempt to access my account, this time from the bank's mobile app. The next morning, breakfast was a casual affair with people drifting in and out of the kitchen for coffee and Aunt Patricia's blueberry pancakes. I noticed Kyle watching me from over his coffee mug as I checked my phone. "Business never sleeps, huh?" he remarked. "Must be exhausting, being a one-woman show." "I have employees," I corrected him. "Good ones. But yes, when you run your own business, you're never really off the clock." "That's why I prefer investments," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Money working for me, not the other way around." Before I could respond, my phone rang. Claire, my business partner. I excused myself to take the call on the porch. "Rebecca, something's wrong with the vendor payment," she said without preamble. "The transfer bounced. The system says insufficient funds, but that can't be right. We had the money earmarked specifically for this." "That's impossible," I said, my stomach tightening. "Let me check the account." I hung up and immediately logged into my banking app, my fingers suddenly clumsy with dread. The password worked, but what I saw made my blood run cold. Every account, from checking to savings to my business account, showed the same balance, $0. In disbelief, I clicked through each account's transaction history. Multiple transfers had been made yesterday evening and early this morning, draining every penny to an account I didn't recognize. Over $120,000 gone. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as I stared at the screen. This wasn't a technical error. Someone had deliberately emptied my accounts, someone who had access to my devices, who had been watching me, who knew exactly when to strike. I stumbled back into the kitchen, my face surely as white as the knuckles gripping my phone. The casual morning chatter died as everyone turned to look at me. "Rebecca?" Uncle Robert asked, concern etching his face. What's wrong? My money, I managed to say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. All of it. Gone. What do you mean gone? Uncle Robert stood up, his breakfast forgotten. My hands trembled as I showed him my phone screen. Every account completely emptied. Over $120,000. All the money for my business expansion. My personal savings, everything. The kitchen erupted in concerned voices. Aunt Patricia gasped dramatically. Emma rushed to my side, looking at the screen in horror. Only 2 people remained unusually quiet. Allison, who suddenly became intensely interested in her coffee cup, and Kyle, whose expression I couldn't quite read. Have you called the bank? Emma asked, her arm around my shoulders. Not yet. I just saw it, I replied, already dialing the customer service number with shaking fingers. The family fell silent as I spoke with the bank representative, putting the call on speaker so everyone could hear. Yes, Ms. Mitchell, I'm seeing several large transfers made from your accounts starting at 11:42 p.m. last night and continuing through 4:15 a.m. this morning, the representative confirmed. The transfers appear to have been authorized with your correct credentials. I didn't make those transfers, I insisted, my voice rising. I was asleep. The system shows they were initiated from a device that's been previously used to access your accounts from your current IP address location, she continued, her voice professionally detached. Your password and security questions were correctly entered. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Someone here, in this house, had accessed my accounts using my own devices. Someone who had watched me closely enough to obtain my passwords, who knew exactly what they were doing. I ended the call after being told the bank would open a fraud investigation, but recovery of the funds wasn't guaranteed since the transfers appeared legitimate from their end. The representative's final words rang in my ears. In cases where someone with access to your devices and passwords makes transfers, it can be difficult to prove fraud versus authorized transactions you later regretted. Slowly, I turned to face my family gathered around the kitchen table. Uncle Robert looked concerned, Aunt Patricia shocked, Emma outraged. And then there was Kyle leaning against the counter with arms crossed, a strange calmness about him that felt completely out of place amid the crisis. Someone in this house stole my money, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Someone accessed my laptop yesterday, figured out my passwords, and transferred every cent I have to another account. Now, Rebecca, Aunt Patricia said nervously, let's not jump to conclusions. It could be a technical error, or perhaps you authorized these transfers and forgot. I didn't forget someone stealing my entire life savings, I snapped. The room fell silent again. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. Rebecca's right. This is serious. If someone here is responsible, they need to come forward now, before this gets worse. I scanned the faces around me, lingering on Kyle's. His expression remained neutral, but there was something in his eyes, a glimmer of satisfaction, perhaps. Kyle, I said directly, you seemed very interested in my laptop yesterday. Were you in my room while I was helping with dinner? Allison immediately bristled. Are you accusing my husband of stealing? That's low, Rebecca, even for you. I'm simply asking a question, I replied, not taking my eyes off Kyle. It's interesting that you jumped to his defense before he even answered. Kyle's mouth curved into a slight smile. Your sister knows I would never need to steal from anyone. Unlike some people, we're doing quite well financially. Then you won't mind showing everyone your bank accounts, I countered. Since you're doing so well. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Kyle's smile faltered for just a moment before returning, more force this time. I don't have to prove anything to you, he said coldly. Maybe you should look at your business partner before throwing accusations at family. Or maybe your expansion plans weren't as solid as you thought, and this is a convenient excuse. Stop it, both of you. Allison cried out. She looked pale, almost ill. Rebecca, you can't just accuse people without proof. The transfers were made from devices at this location, I said, trying to keep my voice level. from my devices, which someone accessed without my permission. The only people here are family. Uncle Robert stepped between us, ever the mediator. Let's all take a breath. Rebecca, you've called the bank, and they're investigating. Maybe we should let the professionals handle this. The professionals won't be able to do much if the transfers looked legitimate, I said, feeling desperation creeping in. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. I turned to grab my phone to call the police when I noticed something, Kyle checking his own phone, the ghost of a smirk playing on his lips as he looked at the screen. Something about his confidence, his complete lack of concern in the face of such a serious accusation, made the pieces click together in my mind. It was you, I said quietly, certainty washing over me. You stole my money. The room fell deadly silent. Even Allison seemed to hold her breath. Kyle looked up slowly, meeting my gaze with cold eyes. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, incredibly, he shrugged. We needed it more than you, he said, his voice casual, as if discussing borrowing a cup of sugar. You've always had it easy, Rebecca. Your cute little business, your perfect life. Some of us have real problems. The admission sent shockwaves through the room. Aunt Patricia gasped. Uncle Robert's mouth fell open. Emma swore under her breath. Allison looked like she might faint. Kyle, she whispered, tell me you didn't. But his expression told the truth. My brother-in-law had stolen my life savings, and he wasn't even trying to deny it. You son of a bitch, I breathed, anger replacing shock. That money wasn't just mine. It was for my employees, for the business that supports 5 families besides my own. Oh, spare me the guilt trip, Kyle rolled his eyes. You'll bounce back. People like you always do. Meanwhile, we're drowning in debt because of Allison's medical bills that you never even bothered to ask about. I looked at my sister in confusion. What medical bills? Allison, are you sick? She wouldn't meet my eyes, and I saw Kyle shoot her a warning glance. It doesn't matter, he said dismissively. What matters is we needed that money more than you did. Consider it a family loan. A loan? I was nearly shouting now. You stole $120,000 from me. I'm calling the police. Kyle's expression hardened. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Family loyalty goes both ways, Rebecca. You really want your sister to suffer because you can't share your good fortune. Don't you dare talk to me about family loyalty after what you've done, I seethed, reaching for my phone. Kyle lunged forward suddenly, grabbing for my phone. I said no police. Uncle Robert stepped between us as Emma pulled me back. Kyle, that's enough, he shouted. In the chaos, I caught a glimpse of Allison's face, not just upset, but terrified. Not of me or the situation, but of Kyle. I'd seen that look before on the faces of women who came into my boutique with carefully concealed bruises and practiced excuses. Allison, I said more gently, what's really going on here? Talk to me. Before she could answer, Kyle cut in. We're done talking. Allison, get our bags. We're leaving. You're not going anywhere until I get my money back, I said firmly. Every penny of it, today, or I'm calling the police regardless of what you threaten. Kyle laughed, the sound cold and mocking. Good luck with that. The money's already been moved again. You'll never find it. Then you won't mind what's coming next, I said, my voice steady despite my trembling hands as I reached for my bag. Kyle and Allison laughed, the sound jarring and discordant, hers tinged with hysteria, his with contempt. That's when we heard it, a loud, authoritative bang that shook the entire house. For a moment, everyone froze in confusion. Then came the unmistakable sound of the front door being forced open, followed by multiple sets of heavy footsteps entering the lake house. Police. Everyone stay where you are. The kitchen fell into stunned silence as 2 uniformed officers appeared in the doorway, followed by a plainclothes detective who surveyed the room with practiced eyes. Rebecca Mitchell? The detective asked, looking directly at me. I nodded, still processing their sudden appearance. Yes, that's me. I'm Detective Harmon with Portland PD, Financial Crimes Unit, she said, showing her badge. We received an automated alert about suspicious activity on your accounts and attempted identity theft in progress. Kyle's face drained of color so quickly I thought he might pass out. Allison gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Officers, there's been a misunderstanding, Kyle started, his voice suddenly all charm and reasonability. This is a family matter we're in the process of resolving privately. Detective Harmon ignored him, focusing on me. Ms. Mitchell, we need to speak with you privately about the activity on your accounts. We already have some information from your bank's fraud department. She has no proof of anything, Kyle interjected loudly. This is ridiculous. You can't just burst in here on a family weekend. Actually, we can, one of the uniformed officers responded coolly. We have probable cause and Ms. Mitchell's bank has already provided preliminary evidence of fraud. I felt a surge of hope as I followed Detective Harmon to the living room, leaving the stunned family in the kitchen. Once alone, she explained that my bank's fraud detection system had flagged the unusual activity and automatically alerted authorities when the pattern matched known fraud schemes. We need your formal statement, she said, but we've already frozen the receiving accounts. With your cooperation, we have a good chance of recovering most of your funds. When we returned to the kitchen, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Kyle was pacing, his earlier smugness replaced by barely controlled panic. Allison sat hunched at the table, tears streaming down her face. I'd like my money back, I said firmly to Kyle. Every penny of it. Now, it's not that simple, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. The money's been moved, distributed. It's not all in one place anymore. Then you'd better start explaining exactly where it is, Detective Harmon said, because right now you're looking at felony charges for fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. Kyle's composure cracked. You don't understand. We had debts, gambling debts to people you don't want to cross. They were threatening us. Allison let out a choked sob. Kyle, stop lying. There are no loan sharks. Just tell the truth for once. The room fell silent again as all eyes turned to my sister. Allison? I asked gently. What's really going on? She looked up, her face a mask of shame and fear. There are no medical bills, Becca. I'm so sorry. He's been gambling everything away. My inheritance, our savings, even taking out loans in my name. When he found out about your business expansion. Shut up, Allison. Kyle shouted, taking a threatening step toward her. The uniformed officers moved quickly, positioning themselves between Kyle and my sister. Sir, stand down now, one ordered firmly. Detective Harmon turned to Allison. Mrs. Henderson, are you saying your husband coerced you into this scheme? Allison nodded, unable to speak through her tears. She's lying. Kyle protested. This was her idea too. Tell them, Allison. Tell them how you agreed we deserved that money more than your stuck-up sister. I felt physically ill watching my sister shrink under his accusations. How long had this been going on? How had I missed the signs? Carl Henderson, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny, Detective Harmon announced, nodding to the officers who moved to handcuff him. This is ridiculous. Kyle struggled against the officers. It's my word against hers. You have no proof I did anything. Actually, Uncle Robert spoke up unexpectedly. Rebecca isn't the first person in this family you've stolen from. All eyes turned to my uncle, whose normally jovial face was set in grim lines. Last Christmas, my retirement account was accessed and $10,000 disappeared, he continued. I thought it was a banking error when the money reappeared 3 days later. Now I'm wondering if Kyle was testing the waters, seeing if he could get away with it. Uncle Robert, why didn't you say anything? I asked, shocked. I didn't want to upset the family during the holidays, he admitted. And when the money returned, I convinced myself it was just a glitch. Anyone can make accusations, Kyle said desperately. You have no proof. That's where you're wrong, I said, reaching into my bag. I do have proof. Kyle's expression faltered as I pulled out my phone and opened an app. After someone tried to hack my business accounts last year, I installed security software on all my devices. It takes snapshots every time someone enters incorrect passwords and tracks all access attempts. I handed my phone to Detective Harmon, who scrolled through the evidence, clear images of Kyle using my laptop in my bedroom, timestamp data showing his failed and successful login attempts, even keylogger data capturing the account numbers he transferred my money to. "This is quite comprehensive," the detective remarked, impressed. Kyle's face contorted with rage. "You set me up. You knew all along and you let me walk right into this." "No, Kyle," I said evenly. "You set yourself up. I just made sure you couldn't get away with it." As the officers began leading Kyle away, he turned to Allison with a look that sent chills down my spine. "This isn't over," he hissed. "Remember what I told you would happen if you ever crossed me." Detective Harmon immediately took note of the threat. Add intimidation of a witness to the charges, she instructed the officers. Allison collapsed into sobs as Kyle was led out of the house, the screen door slamming behind them. I rushed to my sister's side, wrapping my arms around her trembling shoulders. "I'm so sorry, Becca," she cried. "I knew what he was doing was wrong, but I was so scared. He said if I ever told anyone he'd..." She couldn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. The bruises I'd glimpsed earlier suddenly made terrible sense. "It's okay," I soothed, though nothing about the situation was remotely okay. "You're safe now. He can't hurt you anymore." Detective Harmon approached us gently. "Mrs. Henderson, given what I've just witnessed, I have to ask, has your husband been physically abusive toward you?" Allison hesitated, then slowly rolled up her sleeve to reveal a pattern of bruises in different stages of healing. "He's careful," she whispered. "Always where people won't see." The detective's expression softened with professional compassion. "We'll need to document this and take a full statement. There will be resources available to help you." As Allison nodded tearfully, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that Kyle was being held accountable, horror at what my sister had endured, and guilt that I hadn't recognized the signs sooner. "What happens now?" I asked the detective. "We'll process Mr. Henderson and continue the investigation," she explained. "Your bank is already working to reverse the transfers. With the evidence you've provided, there's a good chance you'll recover most, if not all, of your money." After taking preliminary statements from everyone, the detective left her card and promised to be in touch soon. As the police cars pulled away from the lake house, the family gathered in stunned silence in the living room. Uncle Robert was the first to speak. "I think we all need a strong cup of coffee." "Or something stronger." Aunt Patricia dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "In 30 years of family reunions, I never imagined anything like this." Emma sat beside Allison, holding her hand supportively. "You're not alone, you know. We're all here for you." I looked around at my family, imperfect, sometimes dysfunctional, but ultimately bound by something stronger than Kyle's manipulation and deceit. For the first time since discovering the theft, I allowed myself to take a deep breath. The crisis wasn't over, but at least now we were facing it together. What Kyle never understood about me was that I'd learned to be prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. The boutique clothing industry is more cutthroat than most people realize, and I'd weathered my share of storms. Last year, someone had attempted to hack into my business accounts after a disgruntled former employee sold their login credentials on the dark web. The hack was caught quickly, but the experience left me paranoid, in a healthy way. I'd immediately hired Maya Patel, a cybersecurity consultant who specialized in small business protection. Think of it as insurance, Maya had told me as she installed sophisticated monitoring software on all my devices. "You hope you never need it, but if you do, you'll be grateful you have it." The morning after Kyle's arrest, while Allison was giving her formal statement to Detective Harmon, I sat on the lake house porch with my laptop, on a video call with Maya. Your security measures worked perfectly, she confirmed, reviewing the data. The software captured everything: timestamps, keystrokes, account numbers. The snapshots even show him inputting the receiving account details. Thank God I listened to you, I said, still processing how close I'd come to losing everything. Can you send all this to Detective Harmon? Already packaged and encrypted for law enforcement, Maya assured me. Rebecca, I don't mean to pry, but this wasn't some random hacker. This was family. Are you okay? I gazed out at the lake, watching the morning sunlight dance across the water. I'm still processing, I admitted. But I'll be all right. After ending the call, I found Emma waiting for me in the kitchen with fresh coffee. You knew, she said, not a question but an observation. You suspected Kyle and were prepared for this. I accepted the coffee gratefully. Not exactly. I knew someone tried accessing my accounts, but I wasn't sure who. The security measures were already in place from a previous incident. Emma shook her head, impressed. Always 2 steps ahead. That's why your business succeeds where others fail. I wish I'd been more aware of what was happening with Allison, I said, guilt creeping into my voice. All this time, he was abusing her, controlling her, and I had no idea. Abusers are masters at hiding their true nature, Emma said gently. And Allison was too scared and ashamed to reach out. Our conversation was interrupted by Uncle Robert, who entered the kitchen with a grim expression. I just got off the phone with my friend at the credit union. I asked him to check if anyone else in the family might have been compromised. And I prompted, feeling a new wave of dread. Aunt Patricia's retirement account showed unusual access patterns 3 months ago. Nothing was taken, but someone was definitely looking around. And my son's college fund had $1,000 missing last month that was returned 2 days later, disguised as a bank adjustment. He was testing the waters, Emma realized. Seeing what he could get away with before going for the big score, Rebecca's accounts. Uncle Robert nodded. I've asked everyone to check their accounts and credit reports. Who knows how many of us he's targeted? Later that afternoon, I found myself alone with Allison for the first time since Kyle's arrest. She sat on her bed, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd seen her since we were children. I don't know who I am anymore, Becca, she whispered. 3 years with him, and I lost myself completely. I became whatever he wanted me to be. I sat beside her, taking her hand. You're still you. You're still the girl who used to organize neighborhood talent shows and stand up to bullies at school. He didn't erase that person. He just buried her for a while. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I should have told you what was happening. When he started talking about taking your money, I should have warned you. Why didn't you? I asked gently. He had evidence. Things he threatened to use against me if I ever betrayed him. She shuddered. And he said no one would believe me anyway, that they'd all think I was just jealous of your success. What kind of evidence? I asked, suddenly alert. He made me do things. Take things from stores. He filmed it. She could barely get the words out. Said he'd send it to everyone we know, to the police. Said I'd go to jail. My blood boiled at the calculated cruelty. Allison, that's blackmail and coercion. Detective Harmon needs to know about this. I told her this morning, she admitted. They're adding more charges. And they found other victims. Other women before me. The revelation didn't surprise me as much as it should have. Someone capable of Kyle's level of manipulation and abuse rarely stopped at one victim. While searching through Kyle's belongings for any additional evidence, Uncle Robert had made a disturbing discovery: a hidden folder containing personal information on several family members, including bank account numbers, social security numbers, and even copies of driver's licenses. He's been planning this for years, Uncle Robert told me, showing me the folder. Collecting information bit by bit, probably every time we got together as a family. Among the documents, I found something that made my stomach turn: a detailed timeline of my business activities, including notes about my expansion plans and loan application. Kyle had been stalking my business success, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. By evening, Detective Harmon returned with news. "We've frozen all accounts connected to your brother-in-law," she informed us. "The good news is we've located most of your money, Ms. Mitchell. The bad news is he converted some of it to cryptocurrency, which is harder to trace. We're working on that portion." "What about the other victims?" I asked. Uncle Robert found evidence he was targeting more family members. "We're expanding the investigation," she confirmed. "Mr. Henderson appears to have been running a rather sophisticated identity theft operation, not just within your family, but potentially targeting others as well." After the detective left, I sat with Allison on the dock, our feet dangling in the cool lake water as the sun began to set. The familiar setting felt surreal after everything that had happened. "What will you do now?" I asked her. She took a deep breath, seeming to draw strength from the expansive sky above us. "Get a divorce, obviously. Find a therapist. Maybe go back to school and finish my degree. You could stay with me for a while," I offered. "I have the spare room." She looked at me, surprise and gratitude mixing in her expression. "After everything that happened? You'd still take me in?" "You're my sister," I said simply. "I'll try to destroy both of us. I'm not going to let him succeed." For the first time in days, Allison smiled, a small, fragile thing, but genuine. "Remember how Mom always said we were stronger together than apart?" I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. She was right. As darkness fell over the lake, the family gathered in the living room, the atmosphere somber but resolute. The weekend that was supposed to be about reconnection had instead revealed deep fractures, but also the strength that held us together despite them. "I've spoken with a lawyer friend," Uncle Robert announced. "He's agreed to represent Allison pro bono in the divorce proceedings." "And Patricia, forever practical," added, "and I've called my friend at the women's shelter. They have resources to help Allison get back on her feet." Emma raised her glass of wine. "To family, the real kind. The ones who have your back, not the ones who stab you in it." We all drank to that, even Allison, whose hands had finally stopped trembling. Later, as I lay in bed trying to process everything, my phone buzzed with a text from Detective Harmon. "Update. Cryptocurrency recovered. Total recovery now at 94% of stolen funds. We'll continue working on remaining 6%. Relief washed over me. My business would survive. The expansion could proceed. Kyle hadn't managed to destroy what I'd built. But more importantly, my sister was free from his control. And that was worth more than any amount of money. 2 days after the dramatic arrest at our family reunion, we gathered in the lake house living room for what Detective Harmon called a controlled confrontation. Kyle, released on bail but under strict monitoring, had been brought back to the house to face the family he'd betrayed while officers stood by. The detective had explained her strategy earlier. Sometimes in complex fraud cases like this, getting the perpetrator to speak freely in familiar surroundings can reveal information about additional victims or hidden assets. Kyle sat stiffly on the edge of the armchair, looking diminished without his usual confident posture. His eyes darted around the room, calculating, still searching for an angle. "I want to start by saying I've done nothing illegal," he began, his voice taking on the reasonable tone I'd heard him use to manipulate situations countless times before. "This is all a misunderstanding that's gotten out of hand." "A misunderstanding?" I couldn't help interrupting. "You stole over $100,000 from me. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a felony." Kyle's expression hardened. "You have no proof I did anything. For all anyone knows, Allison could have accessed your accounts. She knew your passwords too." My sister flinched beside me, and I felt a surge of protective anger. "Is that your defense? Trying to blame your wife?" "I'm simply pointing out reasonable doubt," Kyle said smoothly. "The prosecution will need to prove beyond." "Save the legal talk," Detective Harmon cut in. "We have more than enough evidence to proceed with charges. What we're doing today is giving you a chance to cooperate, potentially reducing your sentence." Kyle scoffed. "You have nothing." "Some circumstantial evidence. Maybe a few account numbers. Nothing that definitively ties me to any transfers. It was the opening I'd been waiting for. I glanced at Detective Harmon, who gave me a subtle nod. Actually, I said, reaching for my tote bag, we have much more than that. Kyle's eyes followed my movements as I pulled out my tablet. What is that supposed to be? Remember last Christmas when you asked about my business security after that hacking attempt? I asked conversationally. How interested you were in what measures I'd taken? A flicker of unease crossed his face. Vaguely. What I didn't mention, I continued, was that after that incident, I installed security cameras in my bedroom at the lake house. Small ones, very discreet. The blood drained from Kyle's face so quickly I thought he might faint. You're bluffing, he whispered, but the confidence had vanished from his voice. Am I? I turned the tablet around to show the screen, crystal clear footage of Kyle in my bedroom, methodically searching through my belongings, finding my laptop, and sitting at the desk to access it. This is illegal surveillance, he sputtered, looking desperately to Detective Harmon. She can't record people without consent. Actually, Ms. Mitchell owns this property jointly with her sister, the detective replied calmly. She's within her rights to install security cameras in her own bedroom, especially after experiencing previous theft attempts. Kyle's eyes darted to Allison, who stared back at him with newfound strength. You knew about this? He demanded. No, Allison said quietly. But I'm glad she did it. Kyle's demeanor shifted instantly, his face contorting with rage. You ungrateful bitch. After everything I've done for you. The officers moved closer as Kyle half rose from his chair, his hands curled into fists. Done for her. Uncle Robert's voice boomed across the room. You've done nothing but abuse and manipulate her. Stay out of this, old man. Kyle snarled. This is between me and my wife. Ex-wife, soon enough, Allison corrected, her voice steadier than I'd heard it in years. Kyle laughed, the sound ugly and threatening. You think it's that easy to leave me? I own you, Allison. I know every dirty little secret, every weakness. By the time I'm done, you'll have nothing and no one. That's enough, Detective Harmon stepped forward. Mr. Henderson, you're now adding witness intimidation to your charges. Kyle ignored her, his focus entirely on Allison. Remember those videos I have? One phone call and they go to everyone you know. Your boss, your friends, your precious family. Uncle Robert stood, his normally jovial face stern with anger. Are you threatening my niece in front of police officers, son? It's not a threat. It's a promise, Kyle spat. She belongs to me. Everything she has belongs to me, including her stuck-up sister's money. I exchanged glances with Detective Harmon, who gave me another subtle nod. Everything Kyle said was being recorded, each threat adding to the case against him. I think we've heard enough, the detective said. Mr. Henderson will be adding intimidation and coercion charges based on your statements here today. Kyle suddenly seemed to realize his mistake, his lawyer's facade slipping back into place. I'm under stress. I didn't mean any of that. I think you meant every word I said, standing to face him directly. And I think you've been using those same threats to control my sister for years. But here's what you never understood about our family, Kyle. We protect our own. Against who? He sneered. You couldn't even protect your precious business accounts from me. Couldn't I? I raised an eyebrow. Those cameras weren't the only security measure I had in place. The cybersecurity consultant I hired installed tracking software that recorded everything you did on my devices. Every keystroke, every password attempt, every account number you entered. We have it all, Kyle. Every move you made is documented. The realization that he'd been outplayed all along hit him visibly. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time, I glimpsed the coward beneath the confident exterior. You set me up, he whispered. No, I corrected him. I protected myself. There's a difference. Before Kyle could respond, a commotion at the front door drew everyone's attention. Two men in suits entered, flanked by uniformed officers. Kyle Henderson, one of the suits announced, holding up a badge. FBI. We have some questions about your involvement in an identity theft ring operating across state lines. Kyle's face went from pale to ashen. I don't know what you're talking about. The FBI agent's expression remained impassive. We've been investigating a sophisticated fraud operation for months. Your name came up repeatedly in our investigation. When the local police reported your arrest, it connected several dots for us. This is ridiculous, Kyle protested weakly. I'm a financial consultant, not some criminal. Is that why we found evidence of at least 12 stolen identities on your cloud storage? The agent asked. Or why your name appears on lease documents for properties where stolen credit cards were being manufactured? As the implications sank in, I realized Kyle's theft from my accounts wasn't an isolated incident or a crime of opportunity. It was part of a much larger operation. The family reunion had simply provided convenient access to my devices. The FBI agents continued questioning Kyle, who grew increasingly agitated. When they mentioned a co-conspirator named Marcus who had already agreed to testify, Kyle lost what remained of his composure. Marcus is lying, he shouted, jumping to his feet. I never touched those credit card numbers. That was all him and Vaughn. The agents exchanged satisfied glances. Kyle had just implicated himself and provided another name. As the situation spiraled beyond his control, Kyle made one desperate move. He lunged toward the door, shoving past an officer in a frantic escape attempt. The commotion that followed was brief but chaotic, officers wrestling Kyle to the ground as he fought and shouted threats. This isn't over, he yelled as they handcuffed him. Allison, tell them I didn't do anything. Tell them. My sister stood perfectly still, watching her husband's breakdown with a strange detachment. I'm done lying for you, Kyle, she said quietly. I'm done being afraid. Something in Kyle seemed to snap at her words. As the officers pulled him to his feet, he fixed her with a look of pure hatred. You're nothing without me. Nothing. You'll come crawling back when you realize you can't make it on your own. Allison walked slowly toward him, stopping just out of reach. For a moment, the room held its breath. I was nothing with you, she said, her voice clear and steady. Without you, I can finally be myself again. As the officers led Kyle away, his threats fading into the distance, Allison turned to me with tears in her eyes, not of fear or sadness, but of relief. It's really over, she whispered. I pulled her into a tight hug. Yes, I promised. It's really over. The FBI agents remained to take additional statements, explaining that Kyle's arrest was likely to lead to more discoveries about the identity theft ring he'd been involved with. What had started as a personal betrayal had revealed a criminal operation affecting countless victims beyond our family. That evening, as the law enforcement officials finally cleared out of the lake house, our family gathered on the porch, watching the sunset over the lake. The reunion that had begun with such tension had transformed into something unexpected, a true coming together in the face of betrayal. You know, Emma said, breaking the contemplative silence, this isn't how I pictured this weekend going, but I think we're closer now than we've been in years. Uncle Robert nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air. Aunt Patricia, ever practical, added, and to show you who brings an umbrella and who leaves you to get soaked. The simple analogy brought unexpected laughter, releasing some of the tension we'd all been carrying. As darkness fell, I sat beside Allison on the steps, shoulders touching in quiet solidarity. What happens now? She asked softly. Now, I said, we rebuild. Together. 1 month after the disastrous family reunion, I sat in my newly opened second boutique location, watching the morning sunlight filter through the large front windows. The space was everything I'd dreamed of, airy and elegant, with exposed brick walls showcasing our sustainable clothing collections. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire, first day numbers looking amazing. Your interview with Portland Style is already driving traffic. You were right about everything. I smiled, allowing myself a moment of pride. Despite Kyle's best efforts, Mitchell Designs had not only survived but thrived. The expansion was proceeding on schedule, and early indicators suggested we'd break even on our investment months ahead of projections. The bank had been surprisingly efficient in restoring my stolen funds. Detective Harmon's detailed evidence and the FBI's involvement had expedited the process, and within 3 weeks, I'd recovered 97% of the stolen money. The remaining 3% was still tied up in cryptocurrency transactions that proved more difficult to reverse, but the bank had actually covered that portion as part of their fraud protection guarantee once the case was clearly established. My phone rang. Allison, right on time for our daily check-in. "How's the new place?" she asked, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "Busy in the best way," I replied. "How was therapy?" "Hard," she admitted. "We're digging into the patterns that made me vulnerable to Kyle in the first place. Lots of childhood stuff I never dealt with after Mom and Dad died. That's good though, right? To finally address it." "It is," she agreed. "Painful but necessary. Like lancing an infection." After the reunion, Allison had moved into my spare bedroom temporarily while she sorted out her next steps. The arrangement had its awkward moments. We were both adults used to our independence. But it had also given us a chance to rebuild the closeness we'd lost when Kyle entered the picture. Allison had filed for divorce immediately, with Uncle Robert's lawyer friend guiding her through the process. The evidence of Kyle's crimes made it relatively straightforward from a legal perspective, though emotionally it remained challenging. "Did you hear about Kyle's new charges?" she asked. "No, what happened?" "The FBI found connections to identity theft operations in 3 states, she explained. "They're saying he could face up to 15 years now, especially with the evidence from his cloud storage." The news brought complicated feelings. While I was glad Kyle would face consequences for his actions, the scale of his crimes was still shocking to process. How had none of us recognized the monster hiding behind his confident smile? "How do you feel about that?" I asked carefully. Allison was quiet for a moment. "Relieved," she finally said. "And sad for the person I thought I married who never actually existed." After we hung up, I walked through my new store, straightening displays and greeting early customers. Around noon, Emma arrived with lunch and coffee. "This place is gorgeous," she exclaimed, taking in the boutique as we settled at the small table in the back office. "You've created something really special here, Rebecca." "Thanks to the Family Crisis Fund," I joked, referring to the informal collection our relatives had taken up to help cover expenses while my accounts were frozen. The gesture had touched me deeply, especially coming from family members who weren't particularly wealthy themselves. "Speaking of family," Emma said, "Aunt Patricia wants to know if you and Allison are still coming to her birthday dinner next week." "Wouldn't miss it," I assured her. "Allison's actually making that lemon cake Aunt Patricia loves." "That's a good sign," Emma observed. "Allison baking again." It was indeed. In the weeks following Kyle's arrest, Allison had slowly reclaimed pieces of herself that had disappeared during her marriage: her love of baking, her dry sense of humor, her interest in environmental science that had once been her college major. The healing wasn't linear. Some days were harder than others. There were nights I heard her crying in her room, processing the manipulation and abuse she'd endured. But there were also moments of genuine laughter, of connection, of the sister I remembered beginning to reemerge. That evening, I closed the shop and drove home to find Allison in the kitchen, surrounded by ingredients for dinner. "I thought we could eat together tonight," she explained. "I'm trying that pasta recipe Mom used to make." The mention of our mother brought a bittersweet smile. "She'd be proud of you, you know," I said, washing my hands to help with preparation. "For getting out, for starting over." "She'd be proud of both of us," Allison replied. "You for building your business, me for rebuilding my life." Different kinds of bravery. As we chopped vegetables side by side, I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 month. The crisis that could have destroyed my business and permanently fractured our family had instead created space for honesty and healing. The next day, I met with Maya, my cybersecurity consultant, to review the enhanced security measures for both my business and personal accounts. "You're officially my most security-conscious client," she laughed as she showed me the new systems. "Most people don't get this serious until after they've been hacked multiple times." "Once was more than enough," I assured her. "I've learned my lesson about being prepared." "That reminds me," Maya said. "I've been meaning to ask, how did you know to install those cameras in your bedroom at the lake house?" "That wasn't part of our security plan." I smiled, remembering the decision that had ultimately saved my business. "Last Christmas, I noticed some of my things had been moved in that room. Nothing missing, just not quite where I'd left them. I thought I was being paranoid, but I installed the cameras anyway, just in case." "Always trust your instincts," Maya nodded approvingly. Those instincts had served me well in business and, ultimately, in protecting myself from Kyle's schemes. But they hadn't helped me see what was happening to my sister. That blind spot still troubled me. That weekend, our family gathered at the lake house again, not for a formal reunion, but for a workday to refresh the property that held so many memories. Uncle Robert directed painting crews, and Patricia supervised a deep cleaning of the kitchen, and cousins and their children helped with yard work. Allison and I tackled the bedrooms, packing away old items and discussing what to keep and what to donate. "I've been thinking," she said as we sorted through a box of childhood mementos, "about selling my half of the lake house to you." I looked up in surprise. "You don't want it anymore?" She gazed out the window at the sparkling lake. "It's not that. I just need a fresh start, financially and emotionally. The money would help me go back to school, finish my environmental science degree." "Are you sure?" I asked. "This place has been in our family for generations. And it will still be in the family, with you," she pointed out. "Besides, you'll let me visit, right?" "Of course," I promised. "Anytime." Later, as everyone gathered on the dock for a picnic lunch, I watched my family with new appreciation. Uncle Robert telling his terrible jokes, Aunt Patricia fussing over everyone having enough to eat, Emma's kids splashing in the shallows, the ordinary moments that formed the foundation of our shared history. Allison sat beside me, her face tilted toward the sun, looking more peaceful than I'd seen her in years. "You know what I've learned from all this," she said quietly. "What's that?" "That family isn't just about blood. It's about boundaries. About protecting each other without enabling harmful behavior." "That's profound," I acknowledged. "And true. Mom used to say something similar," Allison recalled. "Love without limits isn't love, it's negligence." I didn't understand what she meant until now. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself sitting with Uncle Robert on the porch, watching the family activity by the lake. "I've been meaning to thank you," I told him, "for speaking up about Kyle accessing your accounts. That couldn't have been easy to admit." He sighed, his weathered face solemn. "I should have said something sooner. Maybe if I had, he wouldn't have been able to target you or hurt Allison for so long." "We all missed the signs," I said. "All of us." "That's the thing about predators like Kyle," he reflected. "They count on our silence, our embarrassment, our desire to keep the peace. They thrive in the gaps between what we know and what we're willing to say out loud." His words resonated deeply. How many times had I noticed something off about Kyle but dismissed it to avoid conflict? How many opportunities had I missed to really see what was happening to my sister? The next week, Allison and I visited our parents' graves together, something we hadn't done as a pair since the funeral. We placed fresh flowers and stood in companionable silence before the shared headstone. "Do you think they'd be disappointed in me?" Allison finally asked. "For being so blind about Kyle?" "No," I said firmly. "They'd be proud of your courage in getting out, in starting over." "And you? Are you disappointed in me?" The question caught me off guard. God, no. If anything, I'm disappointed in myself for not seeing what was happening sooner. Allison touched my arm gently. "We both miss things. But we're here now together. That's what matters." As we walked back to the car, Allison looked more resolute than I'd seen her since before Kyle. I'm thinking of starting a support group, she said, for women coming out of financially abusive relationships. There aren't many resources specifically for that aspect of domestic abuse. That's a brilliant idea, I encouraged her. You could really help people. Maybe, she said thoughtfully. At the very least, I can show them they're not alone, that there's life after survival. 3 months after the family reunion that changed everything, I sat in my office reviewing the quarterly numbers for both store locations. The expansion was succeeding beyond my projections, and we'd hired 3 new employees to keep up with demand. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Harmon. Thought you'd want to know, Kyle accepted a plea deal. 12 years with possibility of parole after 8. Your evidence was key. Thank you for your courage. I forwarded the message to Allison, who was in class at the community college where she'd re-enrolled to finish her degree. Her response came quickly. Closure, finally. Dinner tonight to celebrate? Absolutely, I replied. I'll bring the champagne. That evening, as we toasted to new beginnings, I reflected on the strange journey of the past few months. What Kyle had intended as my financial ruin had instead forced me to strengthen my business protections and deepen my family connections. What he had meant for harm had ultimately led to healing. To boundaries, Allison proposed as a toast. And to bridges, I added, the ones worth rebuilding. We clinked glasses, sisters reconnected, survivors both. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, but we would navigate it together. Wiser, stronger, and free from the shadows of the past. If you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal or supported someone through their healing journey, let me know in the comments below. These stories of resilience remind us that we're never truly alone in our struggles. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that there's always hope after hardship. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, family is what we make it through choices of both protection and connection.